Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I just realized I was out on Chrome and I did not have my Restream set up, so I'll set that up right now so I can see what you guys are thinking. We are setting up on Clubhouse as well, taking your calls after I have a chance to interview my guest. Hope we're all doing well. This is the last show of the week. A reminder that next week we have Jason Waller coming on in here as well. We have Annadelle Barber, who's a really fine... I was just tweeting some of her stuff today. She's a fine EMDR trauma therapist who has a new mission to train therapists of color to go into their community armed with excellent trauma treatment skills, primarily EMDR, to be able to offer those community the services that are frankly needed very, very much. Looking at you guys on the Restream, did I fix my computer, Margaret? I did fix it. I got it to update finally to this new. Caleb, you were very proud of me. I updated my laptop to Monterey or whatever the hell the latest computer system, Apple system is. And yes, thank you for that. There's a lot of good enthusiasm for our guest. Let me bring her right in here. It's Jedediah Bila. She is, as you were discussing her on the Restream, she was a host on The View. She was also an anchor for Fox News in the mornings, particularly on the weekends, and has a lot of experience as a television host, and now is spending a lot of time dealing with a 2-year-old. Jedediah, welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yes, if you hear that rebellious 2-year-old in the background, his name is Hartley, and he has his mama spirit, so he wants to be heard. Maybe he needs to get mic'd at some point, but I'm sure you'll hear him. I'm game for all kinds of things. Sounds good.
All right, so a couple things I wanted to get right off the top to discuss with you. Well, I have lots of interesting ideas. One is you were nominated twice for an Emmy. Where were those Emmy nominations?
Those were at The View, actually, for talk show host, which was my first two. And it was kind of stunning for me. And also my grandma used to watch the awards, the Daytime Emmy Awards with me as a kid. So I went and I strolled that carpet. I felt like she was with me. It was kind of cool.
That's fun. That's fun. Did I work with you at The View once?
You worked with me at Fox and Friends, actually. Fox and Friends, you were on with me, I remember. Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I thought we did something on The View too, because I remember you being this is not I mean this as a compliment, but you were had an unforgiving point of view. Like it was very, very firm. And I kept trying to avoid a little bit and take a middle road, and you were unforgiving. And I actually admired that as I recall. But not surprising.
Do you ever think
I don't remember that, but not surprising.
I think that was you. I'm pretty sure. And it was good, but it makes it fun, right? It makes the whole thing worth, although, what do you think about today's world where we're not allowed to have that kind of back and forth? It's the weirdest thing to me. I was talking to somebody today about what has happened in my profession, where I've realized that there are a few of us that are literally running from the corporatization of medicine, where everyone now has a job in medicine rather than as an autonomous practitioner. And as we're fleeing this corporatization, I find myself also fleeing social media and fleeing government regulation. I mean, these are sort of the tyrannical forces that are upon us today and are squashing discourse.
Yeah, I often ask myself, where are the free thinkers and where is the freedom in general? You know, I grew up in media. It's been 12 years. It was a very different world when I started. I grew up, and when I say grew up in this business, I mean because I really came to who I am today. And it was the land of, Hannity and Combs. And I was on The View for a period of time where
we really talked through issues. The landscape has really changed. There's a lot of groupthink that goes on. You know, I did a segment there recently where I was there to talk about mandates, which I strongly oppose when it comes to the COVID vaccine. And I was shut down immediately for misinformation. And I was like, wow, this is really sad, because what you really want is a media world where people express themselves, they feel that they can express themselves, and you have that really good debate that happens on people's television screens, because then people at home see it and they're inspired to do that in their living rooms. That's just not what's happening in what I call big media anymore.
Yeah, it's very strange. I you know, I'm sure, you know, I hosted a show on HLN for many years. I was on CNN for many years. And I mean, the way news is created, you essentially, some young producers cull through the stories that are on the internet and go, oh, we're going to do this one. They write it up. The host is sort of presented with the write-up. And if you have a point of view, hopefully you can adjust it a little bit to at least, you know, feel like it's your point of view, not just some producer's point of view. But you can see how this happens. In fact, think about this. So Chris Cuomo has his problem. And by the way, I was on Gutfeld the other day, and I said, look, Chris is a nice guy. He has his shortcomings. He's a smart guy. Let's not get. Why do we have to crush everybody? He's suffering his own consequences from what he's done. Trust me, he's gonna pay a price. We don't have to all destroy, you know, dance on the graves of people. It's disgusting, frankly. So I sort of came out on that side of Chris. But then I started thinking about that producer that was procuring young ladies, girls.
Yes.
Yes. And I thought, what the part of that story that people miss is that's the guy that was writing the news. That's the guy that was handing the stories to Chris Cuomo. And I don't think people understand that. What's your sense of that?
It's very produced. You know, I always tell people I've taken a lot of heat sometimes for the way things have gone down, not just on, you know, left-wing outlets. I also took a lot of heat when I was on Fox and Friends at different times. And it's hard to explain to people that the way you want, if you're a free-thinking person and you want to have a discussion, it's very hard to do it in those settings, because you have a lot of people around you. Like, you have the show has a talking point, and the producer who wrote that segment has a talking point, and you're kind of trying to find the real you in the midst of all that, as opposed to just sitting here and talking to you right now and telling you what I think.
Yeah.
But that's increasingly a problem. And I think that's why you see a lot of people who once existed in corporate media fleeing to the podcasting space, or fleeing to, you know, these alternative media outlets where they feel like they can really just be themselves, because it's a really big challenge in all corporate media. And I found that to be a challenge for myself many times.
Yeah, and in television, you have the crush of time, and that's one of the reasons people love environments like this and podcasts. Is that, you know, they're trying to capture eyes quickly, and you know, but then after the pedophile produces the news and hands it to Chris Cuomo, then they look at the ratings for that segment, and if it was outrageous enough, they go, ha, that's good, do that again tomorrow, and there it is. Now that's how cable news is now produced, and so and the same thing is essentially happening in social media, though the algorithm is the one doing it rather than a production staff. And again, no time, no. I saw somebody the other day said, I hope it's 2022 is the year of nuance, where we can actually, you know, talk about things that aren't all one way, all another. And I thought, good luck. I hope so. I mean, from your mouth to God's ears. But it's pretty rough to have nuanced conversation these days. So mandates is on your mind. What are you thinking about mandates?
Well, I'm opposed to the mandates. I didn't get the vaccine. I didn't get the vaccine because I'm COVID recovered. I have documented immunity. And for me, I spoke to my doctors and they said, because of my medical history, I'm not a candidate for this vaccine. So I thought that would be fine, that would be accepted in the land of the supposedly land of the free, which is no longer the land of the free. And I think it's crazy. I mean, you have people whose medical exemptions are being denied sight unseen. You can't walk into a restaurant in New York City or a gym in New York City or any real public indoor space in New York City without showing a vax card. You have nurses and doctors who are COVID recovered, who were in the trenches taking care of people and got sick, recovered, and now suddenly they don't have a job. So I think it's horrible. It's unscientific. We know that the vaccinated can also get and spread the disease. You don't have to listen to me, listen to the CDC. That is a fact. So I don't really understand, beyond the will to control people and a will for corporate bureaucrats and political bureaucrats to see how far they can go, because the bottom line is, if they can control your health, they can control everything, and they know that. What's really going on here? I mean, people talk about, it's to prevent transmission. Well, the vaccine doesn't do that. We have to be willing to talk about the limitations of the vaccine. And I'm not telling people not to get it. I'm telling you, make that decision with your family, with yourself, with your doctor. And if that's not a point that can still be made in the United States of America in 2021, we have a lot bigger problems than even this mandate, because then the direction it's going in is extremely dangerous.
Yeah, I have been very concerned about people injecting themselves into the relationship between a patient and a physician. That is deeply troubling to me. That anybody had anything to say about what Joe Rogan did with his physician is disgusting to me. That you can have an opinion, but to feel that you deserve to be intercalated between the caretaker and the patient. Are you kidding me? That's disgusting. But, we have doctors, a lot of doctors now that are, because they're in corporate structures, their practices are owned by hospitals, they just follow the directions, and critical reasoning is gone. I'm glad to see you did this with your physician. I mean, that seems, to me, that becomes unassailable. In Europe, you are allowed to show your immunity from natural immunity. In fact, here's the problem with natural immunity. The test you got from your doctor is really not a very good test. There are good tests out there. They're sophisticated. They're not that expensive. They're about $250, but they haven't been standardized yet. So if people would get on standardizing these tests, then we could have people with a piece of paper going, here's my immunity. It's established for 4 months out. Here it is. That's what they're doing in Europe. In France.
Yeah.
In France, they're very apologetic. You got to do something. They're very serious about it, which is all right. But giving people choice is a whole different feeling than saying, where's your papers? Where's your papers? They just said, look, do you have the QR from the EU pass? No? Well, there's a testing site. There's testing sites within 100 yards of everything. So the testing site over there, please get tested. Or if you have paperwork that shows your immunity, we'll happily take that. Okay, that feels very different than where's your vaccine? Where's your vaccine? Where's your vaccine? That seems weird and authoritarian. And people like you,
well,
people like me too, I had bad COVID. Yeah, I have persistent high antibodies to everything. But I went ahead and took the vaccine, the J&J vaccine, which is now under assault, by the way. I took that vaccine because I didn't want to be hassled. I wanted to travel. I wanted to move about. All right, fine. Maybe I'll be one of these people whose immunity will fall off. So, okay, I'll go take it. But now I'm looking down the barrel at them saying, a single vaccine may not be enough, even for the people that recovered from COVID, right? So this is a moving target. Right. Now, I understand. And that's okay. Science is a moving target, and clinical medicine particularly is an evolving field. But you started from an irrational place, and then you're moving it more. It's kind of troubling to me.
Yeah, I mean, and to just speak, I mean, my immunity is not 4 months out. It's almost 20 months out, and it hasn't budged. And I know exactly what you're talking about the detailed tests that you can do that go beyond a positive or negative antibody test. I did all those. I actually worked with an infectious disease vaccinated doctor in New York City. Who wrote that letter. That was written by someone who's not anti-vax. But you're right. And this is the problem. Where is your line? Because the science may change, things may develop, but that doesn't change the reality that it's your body, it's your doctor. You have different genetic predispositions than I do. You have different risk factors. I mean, this is a disease that has struck the old and the young very differently. So it has to be within your right to make that decision, because do you want a booster every year? Maybe somebody said, I got the first 2 shots. I'm not getting a booster every 6 months. Maybe someone else says, I'll get a booster every year, but I'm not going to give it to my child. Everyone's going to have their line in the sand where they say, okay, enough now. And all I'm asking is, if you have to sort of think about that from the beginning, because I hear you, it's inconvenient. I can't go anywhere in New York City. I'm still in New York City. It's incredibly inconvenient. But when you give an inch to tyranny, it grows a mile. It doesn't shrink. It never will shrink. So now they've been empowered to make these decisions for people. And until people stop complying and saying, I'm not going to do that, it's not going to change.
And you're very unhappy with New York. You guys are moving out. What part of town are you in? What do you experience? 'Cause I was there a couple weeks ago, and I felt like Chelsea and that was it was happening. It was bad. It felt like the old New York in that part of town. But I admit I didn't go up the Upper West Side, or I didn't move around very much.
Yeah. So I've lived in New York, and I lived in Manhattan for, most of my adult life in many different neighborhoods. And we left Manhattan during COVID. We went out to an outer borough outside the city. I'm still in New York City, though. I am unhappy with it. I feel the crime is horrible. I don't like that it reads like a bad dystopian novel. I don't want to raise a kid now. A 5 to 11-year-old kid has to walk into a restaurant and show a vaccine card. That is not a free society. So we're looking at places like Texas, like Tennessee, like Florida. And those are places that are thriving. Those are people who they looked, the government officials in those states looked at what was happening. They realized the lockdowns were not successful. Maybe everyone didn't know that on day one, but they know it now. So they're looking at the data and they're saying we need to empower people to make these decisions for themselves. We need to empower their doctors, doctor-patient relationships. We're not going to be a state that tells somebody that in order to keep your job, you need to get vaccinated. I mean, think about that. People say, oh, you have a choice. You can get the vaccine or not. Really? Well, I didn't know that decision, if I decide not to get the vaccine, I also have to give up my job. I have to give up the means by which I feed my family. That is not the way a free society works. So we are looking for places primarily because I have this little baby and I want him to grow up in a free thinking, free world. And New York City is just not the place. But I don't know where you were in Chelsea, but I can tell you that the city has suffered enormously. A lot of businesses have left. And when I walk around, it feels tangibly unsafe in many neighborhoods to me. And that's sad.
Yes.
Particularly as someone who lived in all these neighborhoods and said, 5 years ago, it didn't feel that way. 2 years ago, it didn't feel that way. But Bill de Blasio, the worst mayor in the country, has made it so. So here we are.
Any hope for Eric Adams?
Not on the vaccine issue, potentially on the law enforcement issues. I do think that he has a stronger passion for empowering the police and understanding that a city that's riddled with crime is not going to be an attraction for tourists or citizens. And if you have children, you're not going to want to live there. So I do think on that issue there is some potential, but not on the vaccines and the mandates. No, I do not.
Yeah, the vaccine's coming from your governor, right? I mean, a lot of these mandates are the masks and all that stuff. Yeah, it's coming from the governor. But how about the new police chief? I'm not familiar with her. I'm hopeful that Eric Adams will do a great job, but I don't know the police chief. She just was sworn in, I think, just recently, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hope around that issue with I think Bill de Blasio was so bad, truthfully, and he discouraged police so much that police felt they weren't supported. You had police that just were saying to me, I interviewed a lot of them last year on the show that I was on, and they were just saying, I feel like I can't do my job. I interviewed them privately. I have a lot of family and friends that work for the police, the fire department, and they just all felt completely disrespected by him. So I'm cautiously hopeful. It is still New York City, and my hope is that people who care about the city look around and just see that what's going on right now is not sustainable. This used to be a beautiful city, an edgy, rebellious city where you flock to for culture. You flock to be a free thinking person. This is where artists and everyone came to kind of develop their skills. And it's not that anymore. And the first line of defense is your safety. When your safety feels compromised, nothing else matters. So I think on the issue of mandates and I think on the issue of police and security, I'm cautiously hopeful on the issue of police, but I'm not going to say anything yet because I need to see how it plays out.
So I'm looking at my restream here. This is a technical medical point. I just want to bring up before I forget. Andrew Ashkashvili, apparently a New England Journal article just came out that showed that the molnupiravir is less efficacious than we thought. On the other hand, we had yesterday better studies on Paxlovid, which is the triple drug. So we need to bring that on. I don't know why they're not rushing that out. I mean, that should have come out. These therapeutics should be coming faster than the vaccines, and why they're not is just bizarre to me. It's bizarre. I don't get it. But I think they're going to try to push at least the Paxlovid out.
Maybe it's not bizarre.
Well, you're going to say follow the money.
Listen, if you really wanted to push the vaccine, why would you prioritize the treatment? And also, let me just say on the issue of health, because I know you care about that issue, why has no one been talking about real health? No one's been talking about the obesity. Nobody's been talking about, eating real food and getting real exercise and taking real supplements like vitamin D. So all of these so-called experts that care so much about everyone's health are into the business of denying medical exemptions and not talking about preventative health measures. So, we can talk about all the pharmaceuticals that we want, but, health does not begin and end with pharmaceutical drugs.
No, this is a really important point. I've noticed it start to bubble up recently. People are starting to talk about that. Why can't we discuss really the one of the elephants in the room. There's more than just that for me. I got to tell you. Obviously, exercise, body weight, nutrition is something that we are avoiding talking about for a bunch of bizarre reasons. But the other thing we're also not talking about is end of life. This should have shined a bright light on people's management of aging and end of life. I've been saying that since the beginning, that, the average life expectancy for a male, median life expectancy upon admission to a nursing home is 6 months. You should really think about whether you ever want to be in that condition. If you are so debilitated that you need round-the-clock institutional support, not for me. Not for me. We have something called palliative care. I'll do that at home. It'll be just fine. And we are so weirdly, we got into this weird one death is too many sort of category where one death was too many and we couldn't talk about death. If you're not having excess death, you're not in a pandemic. So there were by definition going to be excess death, and nothing you can freaking do about it. Either that or we're out of the pandemic. I mean, that's just part of the being in a pandemic, and we're just not having realistic conversations about any of this stuff. It's just bizarre to me.
Yeah, we're not having conversations about actual risk factors and things that, I always say to my parents, like, there's this concept that members of some of the older generation will say, well, you get to 80 or 90, you're going to have a bunch of problems. No, I reject that. You have to kind of set yourself up. Of course, things are going to happen. I got Lyme disease a few years ago, and man, it knocked me out. It took me a few years to get myself back. But what I learned through that is that the body that you build that greets these things, you can't prevent every virus from hitting you. You can't prevent every bacteria.
We're biological. We are biological. Forget viruses. There's bacteria there's things you've never heard of that they're out there ready to get you. And by the way, millions of people around the globe are affected by them. We're lucky enough not to be here. But yes, you're right. You can only do so much.
You have some control over the body that meets those things.
Yes.
You have some control over that. And you have an option to say, I'm going to get myself into gear. I'm going to eat right. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to take these. You can do what you can. And I don't want my son to feel powerless in the way that a lot of these so-called experts are making people feel. They're making them feel eternally terrified, not only of a virus, but also of each other, and completely powerless with the exception of a vaccine. The vaccine is not the be all and end all. You want to get the vaccine? Go ahead, get the vaccine. That is your decision. That should not be where it ends or begins for anyone. It needs to be about more than that, even if that is the path that you choose.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to be taken into the clinical setting. I'm seeing a lot of, I just got to report some of the comments you guys are making here. I'm not sure. Somebody said, God willing, Omicron will take over. It's funny. My son was exposed. He's had COVID and had the vaccine, and I don't think he's been boosted. And he got exposed to Omicron. I said, please hang out with me. Stay with me. I want to get, I think for me, as somebody with high immunity, natural immunity, and hybrid immunity, Omicron could be the best thing for me in that it will challenge my immune system. I'll react. I'll boost up my neutralizing antibodies, and I will essentially have a vaccination. So God willing, I'll get Omicron this weekend.
Do you see, Dr. Drew, what they've already done with Omicron, which so far reports are saying it's mild. Again, let's terrify everyone. I mean, you have universities. I saw Cornell. I think it was George Washington University saying, there are a lot of cases of Omicron among schools where the vaccination rates are like 97% plus, by the way.
Yes.
And they're saying, we have
Omicron,
to pull
by
the
the way, does get through. Yeah, Omicron gets
right
through the vaccine. It just prevents the severe illness. But Omicron, you're going to get infected with Omicron if you have the vaccine. And that could be a great thing. That could be hybrid immunity now, really broad, sustained immunity. It could be a good thing. Why can't we say that?
Yeah, but they're pulling kids off of, they're saying, online courses. And if Omicron is going to be the new variant, justify the mandates to me. You're going to say in one breath, well, Omicron gets through the vaccine. And in another breath, but we need to still have these mandates in place, which were really created to address Delta. So I don't really understand, Delta also got through the vaccine. So these are political talking points being injected into what should be a debate and a conversation about actual health. This should not be about politics. And it's exhausting, frankly, to see it unfold this way.
So I'm looking at some of my notes. I'm going to go back to you had a book called Outnumbered. Is that where they got the name of that show?
Listen, I did not get paid for that title, but yeah, I wrote the book first.
Figured.
I don't know where they got, but it was a book about being a conservative. I was a teacher. I don't know if you know that for, I think it was 7 years in New York City, taught 7th grade through seniors in college before entering the land of TV. And I wrote about being a conservative outnumbered in New York City while teaching in a very woke private school on the Upper East Side and what that experience was like. That was my first book. And people should check that out. It was really interesting because it was the times of Obama where he was completely glorified everywhere in school. And then Sarah Palin, who, New Yorkers just were trained to hate immediately, despite knowing really nothing about her. But it was a fascinating tale. That was my first entry into writing books.
I bet it has echoes in the present. I mean, you were clairvoyant in terms of documenting a phenomenology that becomes really ubiquitous now, right? I mean, isn't that pretty much everyone's talking about this? And that goes to the school. You've spoken out about the school board situation where people have become aggressive. What are your thoughts on what people should be doing there as opposed to what they are doing?
So obviously you want to condemn violence all the time. You don't want any violence because it doesn't achieve anything and it always hurts your point. You engage in violence and you've lost the battle. But what I do want is parents to have a voice. And I think a lot of parents this year felt like they didn't have a voice. They felt like school policy and school shutdowns and masking policies and now vax policies were being made by teachers unions and by administrators who were, the CDC at one point was drafting talking points with the teachers unions. That's not about health. That's not about the benefit of students. That's politics. So kids and parents wanted to have a voice and they're showing up at these meetings and they're saying, hey, I don't like what's going on in schools. I don't want, CRT being taught in schools. I don't like what's in these curriculums. You must empower parents to have that voice and to keep it. And, it shouldn't be that parents show up at a school board and they then get investigated immediately by the FBI. I mean, that is wild to me. So I've spoken up on it because I've taught in those classrooms and I've always spoken out and said, listen, I've worked inside these schools. I know how it works. I know that administration is incredibly biased. I saw that myself. I saw it happen to students. I saw it happen to me when I worked inside those schools. And I always say, parents, speak up. That's how you make your voices heard. Speak with your dollars. If you're, paying for college and you no longer want to fund an institution that yanks your kids out, your vaccinated kids for a virus that is not a threat to them statistically, speak up. But if now it's going to be an issue where parents feel like they can't show up at a school board meeting and speak up without being criminalized in many ways, that's a big problem. So I'm an advocate for parental rights. And of course, you want it to remain civil and you want it to remain nonviolent, but they absolutely do have a say and should have a say in their kids' education. That's their money. And the kids spend a lot of time in school, Dr. Drew. So you can do everything at home, but if school is doing stuff and having stuff go on in the classrooms that you don't approve of, speak up. Absolutely.
Well, I'm sure some of the principles that people are worried about that emanate from CRT were present when you were teaching. Yes, I'm guessing.
Oh yes.
Let's wait. Yeah. So let's wade into some difficult territory here. On one hand, I mean, modifying our view of history is not a bad thing, right? I mean, expanding our view of history, looking at it through a different lens, that's kind of that's what we should be doing as critical thinkers, right?
Well, it depends on what you mean by that. I mean, what I want from, I have a kid now, so I look at this even more passionately than I did before. I want my kid to go to school and I want them to learn facts. I want them to learn what happened to actual history. It wasn't all good. Not everything that happened in this country was good.
Yeah, no.
But why not teach it?
All history.
Now we're in a society where you have classrooms where you once were able to say kids grow up and they don't see race. And that's beautiful that they didn't see that. They made friends. They didn't think about race being injected to every single conversation all the time. That's not to say there aren't legitimate cases of racism that are horrible and should be condemned. There are. But right now, what we have going on in schools oftentimes is divisive from the get-go. Kids are being, pinned against each other for what? That's not good. You can be critically thinking, but there are facts.
Is that true, or is that what parents are afraid is going to happen?
Listen, I can speak to it on a political level, what I've seen. I've seen kids ostracized in schools and assembly halls for voicing, political opinions that went against the administration. I've seen kids belittled. I've seen, them made fun of. I've seen them brought into offices and talked with about their political leanings if they dare to ask questions in classrooms that go against the groupthink that's happening at school levels. I've seen a lot of that. So I personally haven't, I was teaching at a time where conversations about CRT were not really happening, truthfully. But there were a lot of conversations that were happening in classrooms about political bias. And I saw it play out every single day. I remember an issue where we had a mock election during the 2008 presidential election, and kids had to raise their hand. The head of the upper school said, raise your hand if you would vote for Obama. And everyone raised their hands. And raise your hands if you wouldn't. And that one kid was like, these children were afraid. Young, sixth graders, afraid to voice their opinion. And I remember seeing them have conversations with teachers afterward where they were, well, why do you feel that way? And is that really the right way to see things? So I think parents are completely justified when it comes to what's going on. And you see a lot of decisions being made in school for kids where parents find out later, they're being spoken to about issues of, gender that maybe the parents don't agree with the way it's being presented. They're being spoken to about a lot of things in ways that, parents aren't comfortable with. And why shouldn't parents have a voice and say, well, wait a minute, what happened to reading and writing and math and history and science? When I went to school, it wasn't you weren't in school because it was part of an agenda-driven campaign. You were in school to learn. Where is that?
Right. That to me is the more troubling aspect about so much of what we talk about today. I remember when my kids were applying to college, and they went to a academic high school, and the teacher goes, well, it depends what kind of experience you're looking for your kids. I go, what are you talking about? This has all been about academics since they were 9. Well, some people want a social experience and some people wanted this experience. I'm like, why are many of the kids here then? If they're going to go to the further their academic career by having a strictly social experience. I have nothing against them having a social experience, but we're here to have an academic experience. That's why we're doing all this. That was startling to me. So that I could tell something was already brewing when I saw that. But the thing that has come troubling. See, I think I'm sort of Hegelian. I've said this a lot, that I think we all go one direction, then we come back to another, and then we sort of come to a synthesis. And it's time for us to become synthetic. That's why I was saying that, let's look at history. That's fine. Let's get an expanded view of history. I'm all for it. Great, fantastic. But what's troubling me, not in critical race theory, but in critical theory per se. I read one of the documents on critical theory, and that took the position that objectivity, rationality, and logic are the domain of old white men and have no relevance in today's world. And what is actually the scaffolding upon which we should be building all of our opinions is strictly the phenomenon of subjectivity and the political. And I thought, oh my God, those are the scariest words I've ever read. Yeah, it's incredibly dangerous. Kind of what you're talking about. Yeah, but do you understand? That is a point of view that a lot of people, not a lot, I'm sure it's not a lot, but that people hold, and that needs to be really addressed. We need to get back to training kids to think for themselves. And by the way, back when I was in high school and college, it was all about, what do you think? Not, here's what you need to think. It was like, what are your thoughts? What do you think? What do you base that on? And I'm not hearing much of that anymore.
No, that does not exist in most spaces. I'm not saying there aren't some where that still prevails, but I went to a high school where I was taught politics by a teacher who I later found out agreed with me on nothing. But I never knew that back then because she was teaching, and her job was to get me to think and to defend my positions and to feel comfortable expressing myself and to think critically. And she did a great job. She actually recently attended a lecture of mine, and we kind of went back and forth debating. And she knew that I was only really able to do that because at a very young age, she empowered me to do that for myself. I remember that I interviewed for a position for a private school in Brooklyn at one point to teach before I got into my TV career. And I got quizzed. I was going to be a Spanish teacher, right? So I assumed I was going to go in. They were going to listen to me speak some Spanish. We were going to do some lesson plans. I was quizzed on my thoughts on diversity for about 2 hours. And they never heard me speak a word of Spanish. So what was interesting to me about that is, what are you hiring me for exactly? Are you hiring me to be a diversity counselor? No, that wasn't the position I was applying
you're
for.
Making that, you're making this same point that, and I'm not even saying that it's a bad idea to be very vigilant and on top of issues pertinent to diversity. I'm saying we've abandoned the principles of the basic principles of education, and that's what worries me. If you want to, again, I'm all for synthetic approach to things, bring it all in, but one for the sake of other, oh my goodness, that's really concerning. And I think that's like exactly the story you're saying.
People who really care about diversity, they don't talk about race incessantly because they're not seeing everything through the lens of race. You know, they want to hear from people. They want to have exchanges from people. They want to hire the best people. Not everything should be seen. And I know this is a controversial statement for someone like me to say, because I am white and people will immediately say, you don't have a right to an opinion on this because you're privileged. In many ways, I have been privileged. You know, I come from a good family. We didn't come from money. We didn't have green privilege in my family, but I had a good family. And I know a lot of people aren't privileged enough to grow up that way. And that's really hard and challenging. And I know when it comes to race that, you know, growing up, I might not have faced a lot of the issues that someone who was African-American faced growing up. I acknowledge that. I'm happy to acknowledge that. But you cannot teach children to see everything and anything through the eyes of race. You cannot teach children to label things racism that aren't, because then it demeans actual cases of racism. And it makes it harder for those actual people who have suffered real racism to get heard, because they're living in a world where everything is labeled racism when everything is not racism. So, you know, and people who care about those things don't see everything through the lens of race.
And you know how kids are. They get rebellious against some of these things. I wonder how that's going to play out. They're going to react to it in some way. I don't know how this is going to play out. But let me change topics for a second, and let's talk about The View. How was your experience there?
Not the best. I mean, working there was, listen, when I worked there, we had a great time. Truthfully, I got along with the panel. We had a good relationship. Sarah and Sunny and I in particular were pretty tight. I felt that I was able to express myself, you know, and say what needed to be said. I did get fired, so I must have done something wrong. Interestingly enough, I got fired a couple of days after I interviewed Hillary Clinton. And in the back of my mind, I'm always like, oh, was that question on whether or not she was tone deaf? Was that the one? I don't know. I truthfully don't know. But recently I went back there. Or did
something get handed down from on high? I mean, did you think that they didn't like something about that interview? And because that kind of happened to me.
Maybe it could have happened that way, or it was just a team of people at the time who don't work there anymore, who just had something that they didn't like about me. I mean, I don't know. It was just very odd because I had just re-upped at that time. So they didn't tell you,
and they didn't
I
tell
found out
you,
through
and
the
you
media.
Didn't have any evidence. But
I got a call from media.
They never sat down and said. They didn't say you were fired. They didn't tell you. And then
I got a call from media.
That's weird.
and then I had a conversation. No, not the EP, actually. The EP is Brian Tata, who's actually quite nice, who didn't know anything about it either, or so he claimed. I can never know that for sure, but that I believe him.
Yeah.
It was, you know, the Barbara Fadita crew and all of them. And I found out through media, and then they called me and said, yeah, you know, they didn't really have a reason because our ratings were really good and I had just re-upped for the year. So I don't know what happened there, but my time prior to that with them had been quite good, actually. I was very surprised when I got fired. And then when I went back recently, I was very disappointed because I just felt like it was such a chance to have a really good conversation about mandates. And I was shut down pretty instantly and labeled as misinforming the public for just echoing CDC talking points, which is just simply that if you're vaccinated, you can still get and spread the disease, and hence the mandates are unscientific hogwash. So, I talk the way that I talk, and that's what I said, but they didn't like that. And they, instead of saying, well, no, Jed, actually check this out, which I would have loved to hear and been really open to. This gets back to your point earlier about what media looks like right now. And I think the better headline was unvaccinated Jedediah Bila, you know, whatever, as opposed to View Cast has a great discussion about vaccine mandates. That's not clickbait.
And they may have been fearful of being canceled themselves, or even allowing the conversation. Who knows? I mean, everyone's afraid of everything right now. But yeah, again, being against mandates, and one of the things that, I mean, I'm fearful of mandates, because I will tell you, like, for instance, mandates for kids vaccines, which we're heading towards here in California. All you need is about 2 or 3 severe cases of myocarditis, which are rare. But if you make a healthy kid sick a couple of times, like 2 or 3 different cases, people will go nuts, and all vaccine therapies will be under attack at that point. And that's what it's just so inadvisable. Put the mandate out through the American Academy of Pediatrics. Let the pediatricians distribute it and do the mandate. Let them make the decisions for each child as the child comes through their office. This idea that the government is mandating it, oh boy, that's where it's kind of weird. It's just weird. And okay, but again, hear me out. Yes, you can get myocarditis from COVID. Yes, the complications of COVID are worse than the disease. I am pro-vaccine. But when a government makes a healthy person sick, that is going to be perceived in a dramatic way. It's think about it. You're unlucky enough to have gotten COVID. It sucks. You get myocarditis. If COVID sucks, it sucks. It sucks. But that's not a government. In France right now, I was just in France a couple months ago, and the young people are in the streets by the tens of thousands, and what they're saying is, hey, you told us this is a mild illness for us, and now you're going to force us to put something in our bodies. They literally, I talked to a lot of them when I was there. They hear echoes of 1790. I talked to this one girl who was my ticket at the ticket counter as I was leaving Paris. She was a United ticket rep, and I could tell she was like 25, and I speak pretty good French. I started asking her about the demonstration, and she got out from behind the desk and said, "Vive la liberté! C'est très important. Tu comprends? C'est très important." I'm like, yep, got it. It's important. And I thought, wow, how different than here, where young people are mandating more restrictions or asking for more from on high. It's wild. I have a suspicion that's, again, the switch subject back to your Hillary interview. I had a really wild experience with Hillary that was kind of my own making, but it was similar to yours in that my HLN show, we'd already decided to stop doing it. It had been literally canceled in August, but we were going to continue up until like October, November. And I was on CNN every night, and I was on Don Lemon's show, and I did about 10 minutes on, talking about presidential character, narcissism, bipolar disorder, how Trump maybe figured it. Look, I said at the time, Teddy Roosevelt's my favorite president. He was a narcissist with bipolar disorder, like full on, man. That guy, when he was police commissioner, was wandering the streets at night, beating people up. He didn't sleep. That's bipolar. That's bipomania, guys. And he was a severe narcissist. And he had lots of, my favorite president. I loved Theodore Roosevelt, but he had psychiatric stuff going on. So I did that, and the next day I was doing a radio show, and my program director goes, "Hey, that's kind of interesting. Why don't you do 30 seconds on that for our website?" I said, "All right." So I kind of condensed it down to 30 seconds. And as I'm getting up, he says, "Oh, you should do do you have something to say about Hillary too? Maybe 30 seconds as well?" And I said, "Well, funny you should ask. They just released her medical records, and her doctors are doing a terrible job of taking care of her, to the point that it scares me what they're doing." And so I analyzed her record that was publicly issued. I suggested that, amongst other things, that she had a hypercoagulability workup, which needed a hematologist. They ought to reconsider the Armour thyroid. Why is she on Coumadin, not Eliquis? And I just mentioned all these things. Well, next morning, the Drudge Report has a headline, "Finally, a physician says she's not suitable for office," which was not what I said by any means, but stuff came down upon my ears from all fronts, and it was not it was clear to me it was not just coming from CNN. It was somebody else was coming down on them. And so I wonder if you had a similar kind of experience, which is sort of telling, isn't it? It's kind of interesting.
It could be. And, that moment was me really, and I've never really talked about this before, but I wanted to ask about her emails because it was very clear that she had lied about them. And I had, seen signatures that she had signed, saying that she understood classifications, but we didn't get to her emails. And what I asked her was about tone deafness, because she seemed to be very surprised, that Trump had won. And I said, why? I was talking to members of my family. I was talking to people across the country who were really frustrated with a lot of aspects of the prior administration. So were you potentially a little bit tone deaf to what was happening and maybe just missed the mark on that? Is really, that's the summary of the question that I asked. And I referenced some specifics. Mm-hmm. So this was a question that you would expect from the conservative seat on The View. I mean, if I'm not there to push back a little bit, then who is? And it was a genuine question because she was going around constantly talking about, to this day, about this shock about she lost and really seemed to not be able to fathom how that happened. And I felt that she needed to be asked why, when so many of us were saying to ourselves, well, I'm not shocked at all. People were frustrated and they voted for Trump because he was a non-politician. And I'm not, someone who's all in for Trump 24/7 either. I've certainly criticized him when it's important that someone do so as well. But regardless, that moment was interesting. And I don't know if that was the reason why I lost my job, but I do know it happened very soon after. And she's very powerful. So I guess I'll never know. But again, if that conversation can't happen in media, that's a huge problem because politicians aren't there for you to be buddy-buddy and text message and back up. They're there to be fact-checked. That's my job, is to fact check her and Republicans alike.
I don't remember a time in history where politicians were allowed to destroy people's lives. It just doesn't seem like that's what our politicians should be doing. Back when the Lincoln Douglas debates were held, the Republican newspaper told a different story than the Democratic newspaper, like they were listening to two different debates. And nobody then said, destroy that journalist for misrepresenting what I said in the Lincoln Douglas debate. It's just bizarre. But here we are. I'm going to take a little break here. By the way, for me, I found the whole Trump phenomenon mysterious and sort of mystifying. I did a number of shows on HLN where I filled the audience with Trump supporters. I kept going, what is it? What are you seeing here? What's going on?
I get it.
And I was interviewing. I get it as a fact of the matter. It emotionally seemed weird to me. I couldn't quite get to the bottom of it. And I was talking to Rob Schneider, who's a friend of mine, and he had been doing stand-up all over the country. He was the first person that said to me, he goes, oh, no, this guy's going to win. I go, what? Come on. He goes, no, I travel around the country. I'm in the rooms. You don't get it. You're in Los Angeles. You're in your moderate haze, out in the middle of the country. It's my purple haze. Yeah, I have purple haze. There, I've coined a term here. I'm in purple haze. I try to always find a middle ground, and I'm not interested in the extremes at all. But he said, no, this is going to happen. There's just simply no doubt about it. And Rob's a pretty smart guy. And I thought, okay, here we go. And lo and behold, we did. So we take a little break here. Jedediah Bila is here. We are going to we have phone calls coming in off Clubhouse. I will give you a chance to ask her some questions. We'll take just a couple minute break and be back with some phone calls. I want to give a shout out to our good friends at Blue Mics. If you've heard my voice on this show any time over the past year, including right now, you've been listening to Blue microphones. And let me tell you, after more than 30 years in broadcasting, I don't think I have ever sounded better. But you don't need to be a pro or have a fancy studio to benefit from a quality mic. You may not realize it, but if you've been working from home or using Zoom to chat with friends, you probably spend a lot of time in front of a microphone. So why not sound your best? Whether you're doing video conferencing, podcasting, recording music, or hosting a talk show, Blue has you covered. From the USB series that plugs right into your computer to XLR professional mics like the Mouse or the Blueberry we use in the studio right now. Bottom line, there's a Blue microphone to fit your budget and need. I can't say enough about Blue mics, and once you try one, you will never go back. Trust me. To take your audio to the next level, go to drdrew.com/blue. That is drdrew.com/BLUE. Anyone who's watched me over the years knows that I'm obsessed with Hydralyte. In my opinion, the best oral rehydration product on the market. I literally use it every day. My family uses it. When I had COVID, I'm telling you, Hydralyte contributed to my recovery, kept me hydrated. Now, with things finally reopening back around the country, the potential exposure to the common cold is always around. And like always, Hydralyte has got your back. Hydralyte Plus Immunity, my new favorite, starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of great ingredients. Plus, each single serving easy pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 300 milligrams of elderberry extract. Hydralyte Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy to pour sticks that rapidly dissolve in water, make a great tasting drink, has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. It uses all natural flavors, gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and even vegan. Hydralyte Plus Immunity is also now available in ready-to-drink bottles at the Walmart next to the pharmacy, or as always, you can find it by visiting hydralyte.com/Dr. Drew. Again, that is hydralyte.com/DRDREW. Be sure to use the code Dr. Drew 25 for a special discount. Here with Jedediah Bila. Jedediah, anything you want to promote before I go to the phones?
Just my book, Dear Hartley, which I think you would really like because it promotes that need for common ground and kind of, getting back to a place where we can all talk to each other about really important issues. And people can find that on Amazon. They can find it pretty much everywhere. And I think it's something that regardless of your politics, you'll want to share with your family and your children. So I put my heart into that one.
Maybe, yeah, it feels like a message from mom. Maybe the moms need to gather together in this country and help move things in a healthy direction. I'm going to say something that, I'm going to say it less powerfully, but I do believe women are behind a lot of many significant cultural shifts. Women tend to be sort of the keepers of culture. And when it comes to this kind of thing, like discourse, I think you could do a lot to help if there was a common ground amongst the women, which is the other problem. All right, let's get to Saul here, see what he wants to ask. Saul, go right ahead. By the way, before Saul comes up, Caleb was giving me crap saying that purple haze is a kind of weed, which I think it's purple kush that the purple haze is named after. Purple haze was a famous Jimi Hendrix song. It's a famous. If you guys don't know that, I'm sorry, but I'm just showing my age. But so I was not referencing the weed. I was referencing Jimi Hendrix. So for the record, Saul, you coming up here? If not, I'm going to bring old Josh up. Okay. Josh, what's up?
Dr. Drew.
Hey, what's going on?
Not much. I want to talk about the synthesis you're talking about. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm about as far left as you can get. I respect the host. I think this is one of the best shows you've had. And I think one of the things that we have in common is that we're both not getting the vaccine. So maybe that's the way we can bridge ourselves together.
You're coming around. You meet each other on the other side. You're so.
Yeah, exactly.
That happens a lot, by the way. You'd be surprised.
Yeah. So that's something that we can sort of agree on. And I was just going to try to talk about the psychology a little bit, because when we make an other, like, and we have every reason to do that. And the other has every reason to not want us to be part of the in-group. So everyone is full on against the other, and the other is coming back at you as full as you are going at them. Can you make a comment on that?
All right. So and by other, you don't mean another being. You mean an out group. You mean somebody in the out group, yeah?
Well, it could be an other being. I mean, that's how far the out group can go. I mean, we can stop talking about...
I mean, when I think about otherness, I think about object relations and about, how we understand other people's theory of mind and things like that. You're not talking about that. You're talking about the out other. Yeah?
Well, I'm not sure there's a distinction. Maybe you could tell me what the difference is.
Okay. All right. Let's get into that. Jedediah, I'll give you a chance first.
Yeah, what I
Tribalism.
would say to that,
Tribalism.
what I would say to that is that division is a business model for many industries right now. You know, it's a business model for cable news. It's a business model for people in corporate media. And what they do is they decide that what helps their business is to say, Democrat, Republican, go, fight. And it relies on people not being free thinking. It relies on talking point driven people showing up on your television screen that then hopefully you will look at, get angry, not want to have a conversation, and keep watching. So that's part of the problem, and it's bleeding into people's living rooms. So the solution to that is outreach to people who see the world differently and actual active communication in communities and turning off your television and doing some real life with people. But that's why it's thriving, because it's happening you're seeing it among your politicians, you're seeing it on your television screen, and that's now, you see it on social media, perhaps more than anywhere, and that's now becoming the norm in real life, unfortunately.
That is a simple observation that I think anyone hearing your words would agree, but it's profound. I had not quite crystallized it in my head quite so clearly until you said that. Tribalism is a business model, and that is 100% true. It's a business model being used by corporations and bureaucrats of all stripes. And I'm normally not someone who is critical of corporatization. I sort of feel like it's a kind of efficiency that humans use to, help others. But this piece of what's happening with corporatization and bureaucracy is killing us. It's killing us. And I think your statement about it being a business model is exactly right. It's a business model in social media. It's a business model that the government uses for power. It's a business model for all news outlets, and it's even a business model for anything that's entertainment right now. It's just they've been using it everywhere, and I'm not quite sure how you fight that. What do you think?
Oh, I think you fight it by being a free-thinking person. I think you fight it by engaging in those spaces, be it social media or otherwise, differently. And it's not easy because that stuff becomes your new normal. It's not easy. But I think you have to do it. I think you fight it by talking to your children about it and being different.
I was telling someone.
And you know what, Dr. Drew, let me just, if you don't mind, I just want to make a quick point.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes the issue hitting you. Like he was saying, he didn't get vaccinated. So, sometimes it means, well, now why are they painting the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated? If the goal here is for everyone to get well and for this thing to go away, this isn't an internal battle. This should be about humanity and shared humanity. So sometimes it takes it hitting your front door for you to say, oh, no, I'm done.
No, you're correct. I was telling somebody before we came on today about my experience living through the opioid pandemic and what happened was, people want to lay all the blame at the head of the OxyContin, the Sackler family and stuff. They were a piece. They were a duplicitous piece. But the story was that my profession took the position that, pain is the fifth vital sign, pain controls whatever the patient says it is, and a whole discipline developed. And by the way, attorneys got involved where they were putting doctors in prison and fining them for inadequate treatment of pain, which caused all doctors to freeze in place and send anybody that had a pain complaint to a pain specialist. Then the pain specialist developed these disciplines where pain is whatever the patient says it is and pain controls whatever the patient says it is. And then, and this is the part I want to talk about, then the corporations got involved, then the hospitals got involved, then the regulatory agencies got involved. So JCO and California Medical Association and the Veterans Affairs all started codifying this insane phenomenology. And I would argue that we're in a similar kind of wave as it pertains to our tribalism. We have these people that are ensconcing our weaknesses as humans and as Americans and turning us against each other. I don't know how we get out. I agree with you for sure. Free thinking and critical thought and all that and objectivity and logic and all those things you can find your way out. But how do you get people to be motivated to find their way out the same way they're motivated to engage in the gratification of this tribalism?
You wait until it hits their front door. Wow. And that's the unfortunate reality, I don't know if you want me to answer that but that's what needs to happen.
I do.
It needs to, it unfortunately needs to hit your front door. And that's what you're seeing now. This isn't a right or left issue. This issue of freedom when it comes to the vaccine and people's individual experiences, I think has really changed the way people view the whole conglomerate.
By the way, anybody who's saying I'm sucking up to the Sackler family, let me be very clear. They were fucking duplicitous and added to the deaths. It's clear, but they weren't the whole story. There was a bigger story that people need to understand, or they will make the same mistakes again. In no way am I letting people off the hook who were involved in the mass killings of my patients. I was dealing with it every day. So careful what you. Yes, thank you. Saul, I see you there.
Like
Turn your mic back
we've
on
had
and we can...
Two of Dr. Drew Strikes Back.
Two strike backs.
Wow.
Yeah, Jed is getting me moving here. So go ahead, Saul. I see you there.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
You guys have hit so many things on the head. I mean, my goodness. I tapped into this room. I don't know what I was expecting, but it was phenomenal.
Oh, that's good. I'm trying to lead us into difficult territory without becoming partisan, just being people here. That's all I'd like to be. That's my goal.
No. Yeah, absolutely. I see. That's wonderful. I mean, but you guys are just, and your speaker, I'm not sure who that is, but she's phenomenal. Like, yes, please, so whoeher you are,
Thank you.
applause as well.
Thanks.
I'm just a girl from Staten Island with an opinion. It's all good.
Go ahead, girl. And I'm one from New Jersey. So now here I go.
So what's up?
So basically, I mean, I jumped in when you guys were talking about the schools, right?
Yeah.
And I tapped into that because even today, like I had an experience with, the 11-year-old that I picked up from school, and this was going on everywhere. You guys are aware of, I'm sure, the viral TikTok that went on. There's shooting threats to all the schools everywhere.
Did not know about this. It's horrible. Oh my God.
So it was a TikTok and Snapchat that went viral about a threat for tomorrow at schools.
Oh boy. Okay.
So, it was crazy because you're like, yes, they're going for academics, right? And you guys were saying something, and I'm like, sometimes, yes, like we used to worry about how much they felt, and I feel like there's so much going on emotionally for the children at this time that it's crazy.
Yes.
They dealt with everything with COVID.
Yes.
The virtual was hard for some, easier for others that were a little socially awkward, right?
Yep.
So it helped, and it actually hurt a lot of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And then the children, we know of a lot of suicides going on, and we don't know what they're feeling. And I think it's important to really take into consideration that our kids have feelings, and no matter what they are, they're their feelings, and we should ask more of, you said you grew up and people asked you, like, what do you think? I didn't get asked that question. I got smacked in the back. I'm Latina. So I got smacked in the back of the head. Like, this is what it is. And that's just it. You're crying for what? So feelings weren't something that was okay to really show, even, you had to toughen up type thing.
I am so sorry, but you're right. The people, I mean, in one respect, we've been talking about a generation that was asked, sort of coddled too much, but I don't want people to get the sense that asking somebody what you think is necessarily coddling, because back when I was asked what I would think, hey man, they would humiliate me if I couldn't defend myself. they would really meant, what do you think, and defend it, or else they would go, well, that's bullshit. Where do you get that idea? Go back to the book and figure it out. And so, to your point, I am in favor of kids being toughened up, but to your point also, right now, 8 to 15-year-olds are suffering like never before. I swear to God, with depression, anxiety. Yes. We have damaged a generation, and the fact that our government is not acknowledging what they have done makes me sick. And so that all my friends that are in child and adolescent psychiatry and psychology are just telling me the same thing. It's obvious this has been devastation for them. We're going to have to deal with that for God knows how long. And then you add whatever's happening in the moment here, Saul. My goodness, is it your daughter, son?
Well, I actually take care of 3 wonderful children twice a week. And, I picked him up from school today, and he's the oldest. He's the one in middle school. And he's like, I didn't have my phone on me. And then when I picked his friend up to take them to their activities, his friend and him were talking about, well, if tomorrow it happens and we're in this, like, they're making a plan in their mind. If it happens in this class, we could jump out the window. If it happens during the cafeteria, we could just run. We'll go to your house, you know, like, and you don't want to give it that importance, right, in front of them, because you don't want them to get scared or take it. So, you know, you want to lighten the mood up.
But by the same token, you don't want them to get hurt.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I'm like, no, you keep your phone in your pocket, you know, and tomorrow, no matter what, the teachers have to understand, yes, they're scared. And they should be able to contact us. God forbid something like that does happen.
Oh, my God.
They should be able to contact us immediately, you know, to let us know, listen, Mom, or, you know, Nina, like, this is what's going on. Like, you know, so we can react.
Or Nina, I'm going to put you back in the audience so Jed can respond. I appreciate your observations. Go ahead, Jed.
Yeah, you know, so I think those are really important points. And I think this year we've seen, yes, that kids have suffered in so many ways, but we've also seen the importance of parents and of guardians in kids' lives to be able to talk to them about stuff like this. When you look back at COVID policy, I really looked at it as active discrimination based on income too, because people who were rich, they were able to do okay. You know, they were at home, but they were able to hire help. They were able to have someone help out with their kids. A lot of kids that were in disadvantaged communities suffered. I mean, I know I did not grow up with money. That would have been extremely problematic for my parents. Kids sitting in front of computers all day long, no assistance. One parent has to quit their job because they're now having to really sit in a homeschool position. I mean, these were real challenges. And you see kids suffering at small levels when they're really small because of the masking and they're having developmental issues. You're seeing kids who are a little older who didn't get to go to their prom and didn't get to hang out with friends, and socially they've suffered. So when you talk about a pandemic or when you talk about any policy, you have to look at it all the way around. You can't just look at, COVID was a virus that for children, the flu was more deadly for children, not for adults. For children. I mean, you have a 99.997% survival rate in small children, and look at what was risked. You must look at that. So I think to hear her talking about, these issues and just her having to, have these conversations with her kids, just remember how important it is at times like this to try to make things as normal as possible for those children who have endured so much and who really need to feel some of that normalcy again. They're developing. They're doing things for the first time. We have the advantage of remembering a lot of normal, and they don't, some of them. My kid is 2. He's not had the social upbringing in those 2 years that he should have, and it has had consequences on his development. He's, a little awkward around people. The masks scare him. That's unfortunate, but I try to bring him into normal life as much as I can for those reasons. So it's a very important point you've brought up.
Yes, I 100% agree. And let me double down on that. Not only are they not able to engage in their normal developmental processes, development has windows, which if you miss, you don't get back. We have a certain period of time to get these kids. It doesn't sound like you can reach back and just catch up. It doesn't work like that with brain development, number one. Number two, Jedediah, you're talking about risk reward. Risk reward seems to be something that bureaucrats seem unable to do. Public health officials seem unable to do. They can only go, no, one death is too many. Forget all the deaths and the destruction we're causing with that attitude. We can't. All we do as physicians is make risk reward analyses for our patients. I just today,
not anymore.
And yesterday, made a couple
not
of really.
Anymore.
I know. That's where the mandates come in. But I made a couple of really challenging risk-reward analyses for some patients last couple of days around vaccine therapy. Your doctor had to make that call for you and came down against it. It's a really hard decision sometimes, and that's not a bureaucrat's point of view. But to your point about the kids from lower socioeconomic, particularly black and brown kids, 30% of kids in the LA school district have been lost and still not found. They still don't know what happened to most of them. And clearly, lower socioeconomic, black and brown kids in particular, have been disproportionately damaged by what the government did. And so what are they going to do in response to it? Let's double down and create a policy around vaccine that further segregates. I don't know why that isn't a scandal, why that isn't one of the biggest scandals of the century. I don't understand it. It's incredible when you look at it. It's incredibly unfair. It's racist. It's scandalous. It's everything we don't want to be. And everyone seems blind to it. Thank you for bringing it up. I've been saying this since the vaccine mandates came out. The African-American community has some of the lowest vaccine penetrance in all the communities, and now they can't walk in a restaurant?
What the hell?
Right.
What's going on?
It's active discrimination.
Oh my God.
It's active discrimination.
Oh,
but
yeah.
see, when you talk about this, you always talk about it from this perspective of how do they not see it? Them being blind. They're not blind.
Yeah.
I want to stress that they get it. But in order to have people, corporate bureaucrats, political bureaucrats maintain power, they also need that division. Division enables tyrants, people who want to control to gain power. And that's what's happening.
It's back to your statement. It's back to your profound statement. Tribalism is a business model. And I believe that. That is a business model for politicians. It's a business model for news. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Let me take one more call here. All right, let me get Russ in here. Russ, did you want to comment? Hey, man.
Hey, I love the show, and I completely agree that tribalism is a business model.
It's a great
statement.
statement.
I have an example that I always think of, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia, how they were completely opposed ideologically.
Yeah.
They were at the very top of arguably the most powerful branch of the government, and they were lifelong friends and had respect for each other. And yet people who consume the media, hate each other. They just long for this contempt.
Contempt is a very dangerous emotion. It's another word we have not brought up yet today, but an important one. Contempt destroys relationships. Contempt is a relative of envy, and envy and contempt are the most erosive human emotions. Period. Jed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Russ, I wanna let you in on one secret that I've learned from being in media for years. Oftentimes, what you're describing does happen, but it happens off camera. So what happens is off camera, you have people who completely disagree, being like, oh yeah, ha ha ha, and it's all a big joke. The cameras roll and suddenly you see them fighting and it looks like they can't stand each other. The problem is that angry tone is what projects out to people. That's what they think is really happening because they figure, well, if this is happening on screen, these are real people, these aren't actors, that must be what's actually happening, and it's not. So that's unfortunately what bleeds out, and then people mimic that. They mimic that in their households, they mimic that in their social media interactions, and those companies gain power and they gain money because everyone now craves that division. The problem is that division in real life, that's not how it works. So what I always say to people is, I respect people who are the same on camera that they are off camera, because then you're getting something real and something that goes out to society. And if it bleeds out good. It doesn't bleed out more aggression and more anger and more division.
Yeah. The fact that they can be that way, what's the word I'm looking for, where somebody isn't willing to even respect the audience enough to be honest with them. There's a name for that, but it's in any event. I heard a story about California Governor Newsom, standing in front of essentially a street that needed to be cleaned up. He's out there cleaning it up, and then cameras go off, and he goes, "Well, this is gonna, what do you think? Look over there. It's gonna be back by this afternoon." It's like, yeah, dude, it is gonna be back by this afternoon because of your shitty policies. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Where people are so
disingenuous.
But it's more that they have no. I don't know. I'll think of it, of course, once the cameras turn off. But it's when they're so pessimistic. They're so they don't care. They really think so little of people in the process that they have no problem just lying and being duplicitous and disingenuous, as you say. Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Jedediah.
Jedediah, please let's talk about your book one more time before we wrap this thing up. Put it up there, Caleb. It is.
Yeah. So Dear Hartley is for everyone. It's a series of letters I wrote to my kid, but I wrote them for all of us. It's unifying. It talks about the things that really matter in life, everything from holiday traditions to empathy, to kindness, to character, to having conversations like this, like we're doing today. And I'm sure we don't agree on everything, but we're able to sit here and talk things through, and the importance of teaching our children to be able to do that. Even if you don't have kids, if you're a caretaker, if you're a teacher, a mom, a dad, a grandma, a grandpa, or you're a college kid and you're navigating life, this is a great opportunity to get something that's unfiltered and raw and real, which you often don't find on your television, sadly, these days.
No, you do not. Everyone's trying to give me the cynical. That's the word. Thank you, Bobby. I was just looking for the word cynical. They're so cynical that they really can mistreat the public that way or think so little of the public. That to me is a cynicism that is disgusting. But Jedediah, thank you for being here. I leave with two really important slogans. One is tribalism as a business model. I think that's a great slogan. It's just a nice slogan to be chewed on. You can. There's a lot on the bone that you can generate conversation wherever you go with that slogan. And of course, purple haze. The fact that I worked so hard to stay in the middle, I'm in a purple haze. So that's I like both those phrases. So listen, I hope you don't leave New York so quickly that we don't have a chance to meet you in person. I'll be out there in a couple of weeks. So if you guys are out and about, please let me know. I come to the city all the time. I still like the city, and I like it probably because I don't have to live there all the time. And everyone I know that's been there for a long time is getting very worn out, I would say, disgusted, worn out by what's been going on. So sorry to see that, because there's no city on earth like Manhattan. There just isn't. But you'll like Nashville, and you'll like Orlando too. So there's a lot of great places to live in this country.
I will be tasting the freedom, Dr. Drew. I will be tasting the freedom.
there's a lot. I go to Austin on a regular basis too, and it's really quite different. It's quite different. Yeah. You'll be amazed. It's almost like you're going to a different country, which was, people that want to take on the United States, that's all sometimes one of their goals, to break us into 50 countries. But I don't think that's going to happen, even though we have. It's kind of our strength at the same time that you can go somewhere else if you're unhappy. So thank you so much. The website is Jedediah Bila, JEDEDAIHIBILA. Did I get it? .com?
J.
Close. You got it almost, but it's on the bottom of the screen, so it's all good.
It's all right. It's on the screen. If you're well, it could be a podcast they're listening to too. This goes out for audio also. Let me try it again.
JEDEDAIHBILA.
I left out the H, I think. So there it is. And nice to meet you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Drew. I appreciate it.
Okay. You got it. Those of you out there on Clubhouse, I'm going to end the room there. We thank you for hanging out with us. It's been a pleasure. Good questions, good participation. And for the rest of you on the restream, thank you for helping me find the word cynical. You had lots of other very, very good suggestions, by the way. They were all accurate, but wasn't quite the word I was looking for. You thought I disliked aphorisms. I dislike shibboleths. I don't like empty aphorisms. Aphorisms, catchphrases that are packed, I like to use them for conversation. I don't like them I don't like them, you're right. I don't like them as a simple way of dismissing topics. I like them as an opportunity to bring up a topic and get into it. And sometimes, the phrases get people going. Let's see. Anything else going on here? We're going to have a little excerpt from Your Mom's House coming up after the break, not after I say farewell to you. Let me remind you of what's coming up next week one more time. It is Jason Waller on Tuesday. I don't think we're having a show on Monday. Is that right, Caleb?
I don't see it on the calendar yet. I don't think we are.
I don't either. I think Wednesday maybe calls, and Thursday is Annadelle Barber. Talk about this movement to get EMDR into communities where it is really, really, really needed. Good show today, everybody. Thank you to Jedediah Bila, and thank you, Caleb. Susan has been, if you notice, you don't hear her voice here. She's been out. She has a fancy party tonight she's preparing for, and that's a whole thing that happens when she's getting ready for something like that. So it's a whole production that she's involved with. So we'll tell you more about that once it happens, if we're permitted to. It's not that big a deal. I think Josh Flagg maybe we'll bring Josh Flagg in here on Wednesday to talk about his big event. All right, everybody, thank you so much. We'll see you on Tuesday. That's it. You're not in the dick yet. You're still in the prostate and the pelvic floor. Now keep going forward. Now you're in the dick.
Let me just tell you something.
Yeah.
A lot of girls real hot right now.
What did I say?
Yeah, you just did it. You were like, yeah, go a little forward, keep going. Yeah,
okay.
Now you're in the dick. Yeah.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published.
If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com.